My advice is you need to be persistent or don't bother. Great ideas are truly a dime a dozen. I don't know how many great ideas have never gotten anywhere because you didn't have the persistence to go through all the problems that you're going to run into when you actually try to build a business. We began to hear the rumors that IBM had started talking to the dealers about their portable that was coming. The orders literally stopped. It was almost a lethal blow to Compaq. If we had made the wrong decision, it probably would have killed us. We really had no alternative. It was a dead-end street. Once you're totally dependent on IBM to advance the technology, all you've got is a lower price. It was an all or nothing. We've got to do this, and we've got to make it succeed. That's why we didn't try to go up heads up. We've got a better architecture. Let's go see if we can beat them. No, that's not good enough. We need to stack the deck in our favor.
Welcome to Forging the Future, and I'm super excited to have Rod Canion on the show today. Rod is the co-founder and first CEO of Compaq. He's an investor and a tech mentor, and really the OG of startup founders, I think, here in Houston. Rod, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so going back to the 80s, you were one of the founders. Compaq was the first company that had 100 million in sales in its first year, right? And it happened here in Houston. So maybe take me back a little bit on like your decision to leave the job that you had and start Compaq.
It's interesting. I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I worked for Texas Instruments for 13 years. Loved what I did there. TI was a great training ground. I actually had the chance to start 3 different businesses while I was at TI.
Really? They allowed that?
That they encouraged it. That's how they developed their general managers. So I had all of the experience, the sales, marketing, manufacturing, as well as engineering, design, and development. So they were really preparing me for whatever came, but I didn't know that at the time. And then as things happen, people change, Okay, we actually were starting to build a personal computer, but we didn't know it was a PC because we called it a personal productivity machine. And, it ran spreadsheets. That was the idea. That was personal productivity in those days. So we go study the industry and figure out exactly what the industry needs. We have a pretty good idea. And so we go to Dallas, the headquarters, and present the idea to the executives of TI. And they look at us and say, well, that's an interesting idea, but, we build processors, so you're going to use our 9900 microprocessor, and you're going to use our operating systems. And so, we go back to Houston, and I realize this is a dead-end street, and I'm not going to spend the next 2 years of my life failing. So I started thinking about leaving. That was the first time I'd ever thought about leaving. And then it was probably another 6 months after that before we finally, the other 2 founders and I figured out that it was time to leave and start our own thing.
We refer to that as taking the red pill.
Yeah.
But I think you and I share a perspective on, quitting a job like that. A lot of people, that's a very scary thing to do, a very risky thing to do. But you were talking to me earlier about how you didn't feel that way.
We quit our jobs before we knew what we were going to do. Now, we had thought up some ideas. TI had trained us very well in many ways. One of them was anything we developed, anything we invented while we were at TI belonged to TI. So we knew anything we did there belonged to them that was in their area of interest. So we were looking for something that was in the PC world, but certainly not a PC, and something that was maybe a peripheral of some kind that wouldn't compete with TI. But we got anxious and decided we're going to quit so we can focus on this fully. So in like mid-December, now this is before Christmas of 1981, we quit our jobs and start spending full time thinking about what we're going to do, working with a venture capitalist. And to my surprise, early January, so it'd probably been 3 weeks or so after I'd quit TI, this idea popped in my head, and it was one of those, I can picture it exactly where I was because I loved computers, and I like the idea of a portable computer, something you could take with you. Of course, they didn't really exist at the time. And I thought about all the things we could do to make a nice portable computer, but I knew that if you didn't have any software, you were dead in the water. You would never get off the ground. And the idea that we might be able to make this thing run the same software that IBM makes. For a lot of reasons, IBM was the prime candidate. They were the most popular PC. Every important software package came out first for the IBM PC. The other thing is there were probably 300 different brands of computers at the time, PCs at the time. So people can't even imagine all of those different kinds competing for shelf space and competing for the customers.
And they all ran different software.
They all ran different software. That was the world of PCs. In fact, that's probably the most important thing that Compaq changed is in order to succeed at all, we had to run somebody else's software. And then later, when we had to survive IBM's direct attack, we had to make sure everybody else ran the same software, so there was an industry standard. And that's what we ended up doing. So the idea looked so good when I decided we could probably make it run IBM software. And so we started down that path.
Mm-hmm. But was your family on board with the fact that you're quitting TI? I mean, TI was a pretty well-known company. And by the way, TI, Tech in Texas, going way back when, right? You know?
Oh, yeah. They were one of the very early ones.
Yeah. So
and they're still a great company.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my kids were too young to really have a vote. Yeah, my wife, I guess, for whatever reason, supported me and believed in me, whatever. And I didn't think it was, I knew it was risky, okay. But I had a lot of confidence in my ability to get a job as an engineer. I had a lot of good experience, had done some good things at TI. And so if we fail, we get another job. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't worried about it. And maybe I should have been, but I guess that empowered me to go. But I did know we needed to go fast because the three founders had agreed together that we would save up 6 months of living expenses. None of us had any money to speak of. So we saved up 6 months of living expenses to give us that much runway. And if we ran out of money, we go back to work. So we did have a sense of urgency when we left TI.
Sure. Well, we have a lot of shared history, as it turns out. We both went to U of H, although I think you graduated. I think you have a BA and a master's.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
I'm one semester short of my BA, but
didn't slow you down, did it?
BS degree. Yeah, well, I had to check that founder box if it was college dropout. But I had a similar attitude when I was a co-op. We were both co-ops, actually. You co-opted at NASA. Mm-hmm. I co-opted IBM at NASA. But my attitude of like leaving IBM was not like you. I knew there was some risk, but it was a safety net. Like I can go back to that, right? I can go get another traditional job, and so I'm not going to worry about going off on my own and trying to learn how to run a business and how to start a business. Now you did it up big, and like I said earlier, you hit 100 million in sales in the first year. That was a rocket
But
ship.
see, we didn't intend to do it up big.
Really?
When we left, we just wanted a small company that would be a good place to work, something that we could sustain and grow slowly over the years. Mm-hmm. Even when you came up with the idea for the portable, it was a niche, and that was one of the advantages of it. We believe we can go get into this market, and not a lot of the big guys will be after us right away. And so we were thinking we're going to build a good little company.
But you went right from, of course, you had your 6 month runway. You actually went out and sought out venture capital. And this
absolutely.
was way back in the 80s in Houston, in Texas, right, where there wasn't a lot of venture.
We were very lucky. And I can't remember now, but it may have been that there was a new venture capital company in Texas that sort of enabled us to feel like we could do it. Mm-hmm. It was Seven Rosen. They were in New York and Dallas. But LJ Seven, who had worked at TI and then just started Mostech, was one of the partners. So we thought, we'll go to those guys. And so we went to them with the idea. And they were just starting, so they weren't real confident in investing in a Houston company, in the PC world. So they said, we want to invest, but we're not going to invest unless you can convince Kleiner Perkins in San Francisco to invest as well. Well, if you think about that, it wasn't much of a commitment. But, okay, well, that was more than we had. So we said we'll go out there, and we we went out and convinced Seven Rosen to go along with Kleiner Perkins, and got our first round of $1.5 million. That was big bucks.
Wow. But they didn't make you move to California.
I think they thought about that. I don't know for sure, but I think one of the reasons they didn't ask us to move was that John Doerr, who became the partner of Kleiner Perkins on our board, was a Rice graduate, and I think he had just joined the board of regents at Rice, so he had a reason to be coming to Houston, and he could handle one company here at least. So that may have been one of those little unknown factors that if it hadn't happened, Compaq wouldn't have existed. So you never know.
Well, you mentioned compatibility as being a big, epiphany for you. How do we remain compatible with IBM? And you were one of the first fully compatible computers back then. You actually created the compatible PC industry by your standard. And one interesting fact in your book that I didn't know was that you actually licensed your software at some point back to Microsoft.
Right.
So talk about full compatibility. You were actually writing the OS.
Well, that was
part of it anyway.
That was another arm of our strategy. We wanted to be compatible so that people could feel comfortable buying our product, knowing that there would be software available. But as Microsoft evolved DOS, the number of changes we had to make to it became untenable almost, because there were so many. So our idea was, we'll give our changes back to Microsoft so they can make their basic version more compatible than it was. And then we have fewer changes to make from the standard. Now, we can still be more compatible than other people, and especially we get there first, and then when we give them to Microsoft, they come out at the next iteration, which may be 6 months later. So we were confident we could stay ahead of the game in terms of compatibility. But the compatibility was so fundamental to our success, and I'll tell you why. We have this product, we build up the prototypes, we're going out to recruit dealers. We decided we're going to go to computer stores. And so Bill Murtaugh, one of the co-founders, who was a marketing guy, and I would go out to different parts of the country with a prototype and cold call almost a computer store. And so we would show them the product, we could carry it in, that was nice, and we'd lay it out on a desk and take the keyboard out of the front, and it looked really professional. We'd power it up, and nice little screen there that had really crisp characters on it. And they would just kind of be almost not interested. And then we said, well, it runs all IBM software, and they said, yeah, we've heard that. We said, well, you'll pick any software off the shelf, you pick it and plug it in, see if it works. And so they'd look at us like, okay. And usually they would go actually pick Flight Simulator. That was the one that gave most companies trouble. And they plugged it in, and it worked flawlessly. And then they would get another package and plug it in, and then their eyes lit up. What we didn't realize is we had this great portable that ran IBM software. What they saw is this is a portable version of the IBM PC. And we have demand for that right now. We have people asking for it. So every one of them said, can you give me 5 next week, or give me 25 next month? Well, when Bill and I got back to Houston and compared notes, we said, we have way underestimated this opportunity. This is a niche, but it's a big niche. So that got us going. We realized we had an aggressive plan for manufacturing ramp up through 1983, but we were very short of what the demand potentially was. So we went back and raised another $20 million. So we had already raised 10. We raised 1.5 and then 8.5. So we had $10 million under our belt. But when we realized how big the demand probably was, we went back, raised $20 million, and came up with a different plan to ramp up.
Once you saw that you had that demand.
Yeah, that was the key. It was so clear. It wasn't like maybe there's demand here. It was really, really clear.
Well, talk a little bit about kind of that David and Goliath scenario. I mean, IBM was a huge, big gorilla, right? I mean, I imagine that you're always worried about them coming along and just stepping on you, right?
Well, the reason we actually went after a portable was we felt it was a niche that IBM wouldn't get to. They would get around to it later, but it would be a few years, and that would give us some runway to build a company. Mm-hmm. So, it worked out that way almost. Of course, about a year after we started shipping our product, IBM came into the market with their own portable. Mm-hmm. They had noticed us because we had gotten into essentially all of their computer stores right beside them, and probably taught them that there was a pretty significant market for portables, and we knew they would be coming after us.
Hmm. And they did try to come after you by trying to change the architecture and closing it down, right?
Well, actually, the first time they came after us, we shipped our first PC in January of '83. In February of 1984, they introduced their portable. So picture this: Compaq is on a rocket ship. We're ramping up so fast. We shipped 300 computers in January, and we shipped 10,000 computers in December.
First company to 100 million in sales, right? Mm-hmm. First U.S. company to 100 million in sales.
And we finish December shipping everything we can build. January starts out, and there are no orders coming in. Wait, what's going on here? Well, we began to hear the rumors that IBM had started talking to the dealers about their portable that was coming. And so the orders literally stopped. And it was almost a lethal blow to Compaq. If we had made the wrong decision, if we had cut back on manufacturing, if we had,
reacted to that,
it probably would have killed us.
And what did you do?
Well, we had a meeting like we always did. We got the key people involved and said, what are we going to do? And, the marketing guy said, well, if we cut our price to 20% below IBM's, we can probably sell some. And the manufacturing guy says, well, we need to push out all the parts coming in. We got all these processors and parts coming in, and we can probably cut it back to 50%. And at the end of the day, it was one of the few times when I just had to say, look, there's no successful path out of this unless something's wrong with their product. If it's either not capable as ours, if it's not fully functional, then we'll keep selling. So we're going to keep building. And one of the folklore of Compaq is we kept building PCs at the same rate, and we ran out of factory warehouse space immediately.
To store all the product.
Started storing product in 18-wheeler trailers. But we didn't know how long this was going to take, so we filled up a few trailers and parked them in our parking lot, and then we ran out of space there, so we filled up some more, and through connections around Houston, parked them in their parking lot, which was a pretty big liability if you think about it, but nobody really knew about PCs at the time, so nobody stole our PCs. And sure enough, when they introduced the product, it took about another week. So middle of February, another week goes by, they're kicking the tires, the dealers are kicking the tires. And IBM says, well, we're not going to be able to meet demand until probably the middle of the year. And here came the orders. So we had all these computers to ship. What I love is the story where at the end of the first quarter, since we had gone public in the fourth quarter of '83, there was a big liability from a shareholder standpoint. Mm-hmm. If we had a big down quarter in the first quarter, and of course everybody expected us to have a down quarter, they expected us to pretty much go away. And when we were able to announce that our first quarter was a record quarter in sales and profits, it was like, wait, are we missing something? What happened here? And it was the fact that we had taken probably one of the biggest risks of the whole story in continuing to manufacture, and then the demand came through. So that was the first time IBM came after us, and it failed. You would have thought maybe they noticed something different, but they didn't. And so then in 1987, it wasn't after us, but they were after the rest of the industry. They were tired of all these clones piggybacking on their sales, so they came up with a whole new architecture. It turns out IBM didn't understand the value of compatibility to customers, to users.
They tried to change it from the industry standard at that time to microchannel, some proprietary IBM.
They came out with this proprietary advanced architecture called microchannel and claimed it was the best thing, ever. it turns out it had a lot of flaws, and we continued to advance the existing industry standard with 386 processors, and then we actually came up with our own twist on the architecture that we called Flex, which allowed much faster performance of a 386. It separated the I/O bus from the memory, so that you could go to memory faster. On all the other processors up to that time, whenever you went out and did something in the I/O world, it kept you from going back and forth to memory and executing. So that was an improvement in the architecture, but it was fully backward compatible. And theirs was totally not backward compatible. We knew also that even though this was better and we could continue to sell some, that IBM would win in the long run. The only way Compaq was going to win in the long run is if we convinced the rest of the industry. So totally counterintuitive, we invent this better architecture than IBM has, and instead of trying to beat them heads up, we go to basically all the other companies and try to convince them to join forces with us. Now, something people don't remember now is all those other companies, literally every one of them, had already licensed the microchannel architecture from IBM. And IBM's license was, you can't get ahead of us. We'll give you the technology as we see fit, but we're the only one that can advance it. That was the end of the advancement of the industry, except according to what IBM wanted. But we went to these guys, and they were skeptical at first. Okay, is the Compaq just another death trap besides IBM? And it took us a while to convince them, but we convinced HP first. That's when Compaq and HP first became really close. And then with HP with us, we went and convinced I guess there are 7 other companies. There was a gang of 9 when we announced this new architecture. So we were only able to convince HP and 7 other companies to join forces with us. Interestingly, once it became real, so we announced in September, late in the summer, other companies began to see this is a real thing. And they wanted to join in, but it was too late because all the announcement materials and all of the, all the PR stuff was done. But we were able to announce that we've got another 60 companies that are also joining us, besides the first gang of 9. It was a very powerful announcement. One of those funny side stories was, I guess it was a few days before the announcement. IBM, of course, heard about it, kind of knew what was going on. And I got a call from the head of the IBM PC world. I think it was Bill Lowe at the time. And he said, so I hear you're going to announce a new product next week. Maybe. He said, we really don't think that's a good idea, and we'd like to invite you into our fold on the microchannel. We could negotiate a pretty good deal with you. And I said, well, if you'd come to me with this a year ago, maybe, but we're way too far gone. So thanks, but no thanks. So we went ahead and announced, and it shook the world. Nobody would have expected that from especially a very young company like Compaq. But the good news is it worked.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, you often don't know it's going to work. I mean, it all sounds great in looking back, and the right decisions were made, but there is a lot of unknown when you're making those decisions and betting the company on either you've got this problem and you're going to come at it from a different angle. I think one of the themes that I like is finding the opportunity in adversity, right? Here's a problem and how do we take advantage of it? But I think when founders look at successful companies, because I know I did, you think that, it's just all up and to the right and everybody just executes, and why am I doing this and why am I running into these near-death experiences? But every large company had those, right?
Yeah.
When you talked about when you raised the $8.5 million, that second round, you had exactly $0 in your bank account when you deposited that check, right? I mean, that's how
never
close
slowed
to
down.
That was how close to the treetops that you're going, right? And just making a decision that we're not going to slow down here, and we're going to start storing PCs and trucks because we think something's going to change when
Right.
IBM's thing comes out. It's a bet, right? I mean, really, you're betting the whole company future on that. And I'm sure there were many times that happened in those first 5 years, right?
So for the extended industry standard architecture, which is what we were just talking about, it was an easy decision because we really had no alternative. I don't know why the other companies hadn't thought this through, but it was a dead-end street. Once you're totally dependent on IBM to advance the technology, all you've got is a lower price. Mm-hmm. And, we might as well get out of business or go somewhere else. So it was an all or nothing. We've got to do this, and we've got to make it succeed. That's why we didn't try to go up heads up. We've got a better architecture. Let's go see if we can beat them. No, that's not good enough. Mm-hmm. We need to stack the deck in our favor. It still wasn't a sure thing because IBM had so much marketing power. And actually, even for the first, I would say, 6 to 9 months after we announced it, they sold a lot of the PS2s, they called it, their personal system 2.
Because they were the gold standard.
They were the gold standard. All the big companies started buying lots of them. And so there was a lot of their computers installed. Now, they claim, one of their claims was that this first microchannel could be advanced with all the new peripherals that came out. Well, in understanding our competition, we realized that wasn't true. They didn't have enough power in their circuits that drove the bus to actually take advantage of the peripherals they were going to come out with. And at some point we mentioned that, which I think called their bluff on how upgradable these things were. So there were weaknesses in it. And when they came out, they announced their first PS2 as a 286. And we already had announced the first 386 PC. So it was higher performance than their 286. This was in April of 87. In September of 87, they came out with their first 386. At that same month, we came out with our second 386, which was much higher performance. It was actually twice as fast as the first IBM 386 with this new microchannel architecture. So it was like, by being able to continue showing, proving significant performance advantages over the IBM, new standard, it kept the industry alive.
Do you think that part of that comes from your engineering and building background, that just this attitude that we can make it happen, we can do it, we can solve this, we can build this? I think Compaq famously has a culture of, why can't we do that, right?
Well, we were always willing to ask the hard question. Why can't you do that? We didn't know what we couldn't do is one way of looking at it. It was really a Compaq team. We had the good fortune of building our first core team of people we had worked with at TI. Of course, TI didn't like that many people left. We didn't go recruit anybody, but they were ready to come join this, whatever it was, this new startup. And so TI sued us for hiring their people, and that was a sword hanging over our head for a while. We settled that eventually, but I can't say it slowed us down. It slowed us down in hiring their people, but we were able to build a really good team, core team of people that were outstanding. And that was key. If you're going to go, create a new industry standard and go up against IBM with a different architecture, you better have really good people that know what they're doing. And we were blessed with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, what maybe was it like being the CEO of this company that goes from, 0 to 100 million the first year in sales to actually the first company or the fastest company to reach $1 billion in sales? I mean, that's quite a rocket ride, right? Yeah,
no, it was, nothing prepared me for that. I guess it was the fact that also, I didn't even like talking to the press. I was not a speech giver. That was scary to me. So I just had to do what I had to do.
Sounds like an engineer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was an engineer.
Yeah.
And so I'll never forget Ben Rosen. I was with him in New York one day before we were announcing the product, and we were walking back to his office from somewhere and walked by a speech coach office and went in and got some speech lessons. And, it helped. it didn't solve the problem. I was nervous as heck. There's videos of that first press conference where I stood up and announced it. But I got through it and made the points, and you learn as you go. So all of that was new for me. And then, the growth part, as an engineer, you analyze the problem. Here's a problem. We've got to ramp up manufacturing. This is high risk, much more high risk than making the computer work on a onesie basis. Is how can you produce these things, control the quality? Well, that was the people that we were able to hire. They knew what they were doing, and we were able to. We did keep the manufacturing in Houston for a long time, so we could control the quality as things changed rapidly. But if you think about how fast we ramped up that first year, in order to get to the 10,000 per month in December, we had this little bitty factory out on Jones Road in Northwest Houston. We moved to a bigger factory in the summer, early summer, probably May timeframe. And then we doubled that space in October timeframe. So we were changing factories on the fly as we ramped up. That was hard. That was risky. Managing, hiring the number of people. How do you hire that many people and not completely lose control of the culture? That was one thing I really worried about. And as a result, I spent a lot of time talking to the whole team. I felt like, one of the things TI didn't do was really let you know what was going on. You had to guess. And then rumors, of course, were always going around. So to prevent that, I would tell them exactly what we were doing. I would take all their questions. I learned how to handle any question, because if you don't let people ask the question that's on their mind, then something's going to be made up as an answer. So it really developed a close relationship with all the employees. It developed a culture of openness. And importantly, one of the things that we didn't tolerate was lack of respect for the people you worked with. If you don't have respect for your team members, then you probably are the one that needs to go.
Of course, these were early days, and now everyone talks about mission and vision and culture and the importance in culture, and probably back then wasn't so much of a thing, but it seems that you came to that conclusion. Did you have like monthly all hands or quarterly? Quarterly all hands,
yeah.
And is that how you mainly influenced the culture at Compaq?
Yeah, and then here's the key thing is people are going to do what you do, not what you say. Mm-hmm. So if you give them this great speech about how you want the culture to be, and then you do something different, people are going to not believe you. You lose credibility. So I emphasize constantly to my management team, you can't tell people this is how they should work and then you work differently. So you've got to treat everybody with respect. Never berate people in front of their peers. If you've got a problem, sit down and talk about it. And it was such a good culture that it became self-sustaining. People didn't worry about coming to work that day for fear they might make a mistake. One of the key tenets of it was you're going to make mistakes. And we had seen this at TI, and so it was really part of the culture was, look, if you make a mistake, raise your hand and say, let's solve this problem. I got a problem here, let's solve it. You can always get the team together and solve the problem. But if you try to hide it, all it does is get worse. You probably never solve it by yourself. And then it's a really big problem by the time people discover it. So the idea was speak up. Don't ever be afraid to say, I made a mistake. That's going to be rewarded, not punished. Mm.
Yeah, that's good advice. It's you really have to build that culture of like, hey, it's okay to make a mistake. The only mistake is not learning from a mistake. Right.
Well, my explanation was, look, if this is a good guy and he makes a mistake, he's probably not going to make that one again. You hire a new guy to replace him, he might make the same mistake. So you've built a much more valuable employee by letting them learn from that mistake. Mm.
So you had all this success and the company went 10 years, right? And then at some point you stepped down from Compaq, right?
Yeah, we were at a point where we had an unbroken growth record. We had always hired. We had never laid off people. And then in 1991, what was the big geopolitical event that happened in 1991? It was the first Gulf War. Oh. Okay? And as a result of that first Gulf War, there was a glitch in the economy. There was a recession. It turns out it was a fairly short recession, but of course you never know when you're going into it. As a result, 6 of our top 10 dealers merged. And when your dealers merge, their inventory stretches further. And so our orders went way down. So we had our first loss quarter ever. I think it was probably the second quarter of 1991. And that was a world that, on top of all the high growth, I realized looking back kind of burned me out, And so as a result of that, I wasn't very cooperative. I had disagreements with the board over the direction of the company, and ended up getting fired. And looking back was probably saved my life, the stress I was under doing all that. I do remember that as I left the company, I was sad, but also part of me was relieved. It's kind of funny how you don't realize those at the time. And, Compaq went on to be a world leader.
At Softtek, we don't just follow the trends, we set them. As the founder and CEO, I've built a team that excels in delivering cutting-edge solutions in software, hardware, and IoT. From concept to completion, we're the partner that turns your tech dreams into reality. Softtek, where innovation starts.
When we did the documentary called Silicon Cowboys, I made sure I didn't have any final say in the editing. I wanted them to tell the story the way it was. So we hired a company came to us and wanted to make the documentary. And the only thing I insisted on, I negotiated with them when they came down to the end of the story. They wanted to sort of make it look as a negative. So Rod leaves, and the culture goes downhill, and blah blah blah. It's like, no, they continued on great. This is a great story. So I insisted that when you watch the documentary, they use music a lot to set the tone. So as I'm leaving, the music is down, but then as it starts showing just in words on the screen of how Compaq went on to become the leading PC company, and then when they merged with HP in 2001, became the largest computer company. They were bigger than IBM in terms of their revenues at that point in time. The biggest computer company in the world. That was all good. Compaq continued on, and unfortunately got lost in the HP world, which is what happens when you merge with another company like that. But they had a good run.
I know how important staying informed is for innovation and growth. The Forging the Future newsletter brings you the best in tech trends, startup advice, and industry insights. Join our community and forge your future with us. Subscribe now.